Good afternoon, everybody. Attorney General Martha Coakley. With me is our bureau chief from our Business and Labor Bureau, which oversees the Division of Public Charities, Jed Nozel. And Jed is the signatory on the report, which we issued today. So let me give you context of that report. In March of this year, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts reported that the former president and CEO, Cleve Killingsworth, had received a severance package of approximately $4.2 million in the year 2010. That was just the severance clause. He had a much larger total compensation package, but let me focus on the severance piece for now. We began an investigation into the circumstances by which Blue Cross, as a public charity, had become obligated to pay such a large severance package to Killingsworth, who, as I noted earlier, was an extremely well-compensated executive. The investigation focused on the terms of the contract, his compensation, as well as the severance clause, and the factors that had been considered by the board, both in entering into this contract and overseeing it, as well as what ended in his termination, his leaving Blue Cross Blue Shield in March of 2010. We also looked at the contracts of comparable both insurance companies and large providers in Massachusetts to put this in context, understanding that we have always said we understand that these large providers, insurance companies, compete on a national level for talent, et cetera, so we thought it was important to look at what other similarly situated providers of insurance and of health care had done with their compensation and their executives. Our report reveals the concerns that we found on the terms of his severance and what those factors were considered by the board and the factors relating to the healthcare marketplace in Massachusetts. So first and probably most concerning, our investigation showed, and in our report we reveal that the severance terms of Cleve Killingworth amounted to, as a practical matter, a lifetime contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Let me explain that. His contract consisted of 1-year renewable terms, but this contract included this severance term that he was guaranteed to receive 2 years severance, which is the equivalent of $4.2 million, and includes multipliers within it to reach that amount, if he were removed for anything other than willful misconduct. Now, it's a very high standard. It is a term of art in the employment field. But unless he was found responsible for willful misconduct, it was going to be very difficult for Blue Cross Blue Shield to replace him. While his severance clause was one of the most generous of those that we reviewed, we discovered that the kind of language involved in this does exist in most of the other contracts that we reviewed. And we do, as this report, and there are other conditions in the report that we're suggesting to not just other healthcare providers or insurance companies, but all not-for-profits look forward, going forward, to look at what the consequences are of these compensation contracts and their severance clauses. Finding the language similar, however, we found that this was at the upper end in terms of the richness of the compensation for the severance clause for Cleve Killingsworth. We found that those clauses were highly problematic because we believed that at that stage it made it very difficult for the board to provide new leadership in the instance that they decided that they needed to do it, as they did in March of 2010, without making that payment of $4.2 million. In other words, to ever effectuate a change in leadership for whatever reason, outside the finding of willful misconduct, it would cost $4.2 million. Beyond the severance clause, we found that Mr. Killingsworth had served on up to 14 other boards, in addition to his full-time service as the CEO of Blue Cross. That work included 3 boards of for-profit companies for which he was compensated for his work, and suggested that both because of the compensation involved, the time involved, did the board have appropriate oversight over his time and his dedication to Blue Cross Blue Shield? In other words, the board's mission is always to make sure, just as their loyalty is to Blue Cross Blue Shield, their job was to make sure that their CEO had the time and the time available and the interest available for the board that he was compensated for primarily, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield. We found in the report that we believe the board fell short, both in having a thorough review process to actually and appropriately evaluate his performance each year. And that, secondly, the board fell short in its own breadth of experience among board members to be able to effectively evaluate Cleve Killingsworth. Having said that, given the contract and the severance clause, the virtual certainty that if Blue Cross Blue Shield ever needed new leadership, it was going to cost $4.2 million. Based upon this investigation, we announced the following actions today, and we are pleased to report that the Blue Cross Board has voted to rebate that entire amount, the $4.2 million to Blue Cross Blue Shield customers. Our office did not believe and still believes that customers, the consumers of the insurance products, should not have to foot the bill for such an exorbitant severance that had been negotiated that really restricted the board in terms of acting in the best interest of the charity. We do believe that the board today, by its action, has done the appropriate thing in rebating that entire amount of the severance clause to its customers. Secondly, the board has agreed to review and implement an improved succession plan to make sure that going forward, the board of directors will include a board with the experience and skills that will be able to serve in the best interest of Blue Cross Blue Shield. And thirdly, as a result of this investigation and our report today, going forward, we're requiring all charities to publicly disclose the full contract terms for senior executives, for their CEOs, including severance packages, and to fully explain the rationale for such protections or severance clauses that are afforded to those executives. We anticipate that for public charities going forward. We think that it will address this issue of disclosure. We suggest that it will then require boards to make the appropriate determinations. And again, boards have great leeway and discretion in order to do the best for the charities that they serve. But that public disclosure piece going forward, we think, will address the issues that we found as problematic in the issues dealing with Cleve Killingsworth as CEO. I do today want to acknowledge the important work that's done by the new CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, Andrew Dreyfus. He and his team have worked cooperatively with us on this investigation as well as on this report. I believe, again, the board has acted appropriately by rebating amounts to the customers. And we note in the report that many of the issues with the Killingsworth contract in terms of the richness of the compensation and the richness of the compensation clause are not at issue with the Dreyfus contract. Those, we believe, have been addressed. We believe also that Blue Cross Blue Shield has acted appropriately in separating, as they have in the past, the roles of the CEO and the board chair. And we believe that as we move forward, the example I think that Blue Cross Blue Shield has set today and the standards that we are setting going forward for disclosure will help all of us here in Massachusetts continue to do the very important work that we are addressing in terms of keeping health care costs down. I'll take questions if anybody has them.